The stars above the reconstructed Sol system looked wrong, too neat, too quiet, too obedient. Elias Kwan floated in the observation blister of the Terraforming Authority's orbital ring, hands pressed against the smart glass that separated him from the void. Below him, Earth turned slowly, a perfect sphere of engineered emerald and sapphire, every scar of the old world scrubbed away. No brown scars of ancient cities, no white veins of salt deserts, no gray haze of human industry. Just a planet that had been told, politely but firmly, to forget it ever had children. Elias was 38 standard years old, though the chronometers in his bones said he had lived closer to 200. Time mapping did that to a man. You spent your life walking backward through centuries, stitching new histories onto old bones, and eventually the years started to feel like borrowed clothes. He rubbed the stubble on his jaw, real stubble, grown the slow human way, not printed, and tried to remember the last time he had felt the wind. "Dr. Kwan," came a voice behind him, smooth as old stone. "The director is waiting." He didn't turn. "Tell her the planet is." A pause. The aide, an androgynous figure in the flowing silver of the authority, shifted weight. Elias could feel the discomfort radiating off them like heat. The authority didn't like being kept waiting. The authority didn't like anything that still bled red. "I'll tell her you'll be there in 5 minutes, the aide said finally, retreating. Elias stayed at the glass. 5 minutes was a courtesy. The director would wait 5 hours if the work demanded it. That was the terrifying thing about the Vera Collective. They had all the time in the galaxy. Humanity had been gone 6,000 years, and still the Vera were afraid of us, afraid enough to spend centuries erasing every footprint we ever left. Closed his eyes and tried to summon the smell of rain on asphalt. Nothing came. The memory had been redacted from the collective archives long ago. Personal neural imprints were harder to police, but even those faded when you never spoke them aloud. His wrist comm pulsed. A private channel. Only one person still used that frequency. "Eli," whispered a voice like wind through old cathedrals. "They're starting the deep overwrite tonight. The crucible layer. They're going all the way back to the Cambrian." Elias felt his stomach drop the way it used to on roller coasters, those ancient human things that defied gravity for the pure joy of fear. "Who is this?" he asked, though he already knew. "You know who. There's still a shard of the old network running in the Antarctic ice. I've been listening. They think they've found the root memory. The moment life decided to stand up and walk, they're going to cut it out." The line went dead. Elias stared at his reflection in the glass. A man with tired eyes and a mouth that had forgotten how to pray. The beard was new. He'd started growing it after the Mars incident, after he'd watched the Vera unmake the Olympus Mons footprints, one grain of red dust at a time, until even the idea of a bootprint was gone. He turned from the window. The director's chamber was a cathedral of black glass and starlight. She waited at the center, tall and luminous, her skin a shifting constellation of Vera bioluminescence. When she spoke, it was with the voice of 1,000 throats braided together. "Dr. Kwan, the final phase begins at solstice meridian. You will oversee the insertion of the Crucible protocol into the planetary core memory. There must be no irregularities." Elias bowed the precise angle required by protocol. "Understood, Director." She studied him the way a surgeon studies a tumor. "You have been distracted lately, dreaming in obsolete languages. Old habits," he said. "Habits can be fatal to a project this delicate." She drifted closer. "We are not monsters, Elias. We are gardeners. Humanity was a beautiful flower, but it poisoned its own soil. We are simply starting over, a cleaner lineage, one that will not devour itself." He met her eyes, swirling nebulae of compassion and terror. "And if the soil refuses," a flicker across her face, "something ancient and afraid, then we dig deeper." She dismissed him with a gesture that felt like absolution and damnation in the same breath. In the lift tube down to the mapping labs, Elias felt the old anger rise, slow, human, stubborn. The kind that had once launched wooden ships into storms and stone cathedrals toward heaven. The kind that refused to die quietly. He keyed a sequence into his wrist comm. "Dead channel, ghost protocol." The message was only 12 characters long. "They're going for the root." The lift doors opened onto the chronoscopic vault, a cavernous space where time was rendered as topography. Hololiths of Earth floated in the air like blue-green ghosts, each one a different century. Technicians moved between them, pruning timelines the way florists trim roses. His team lead, a young Vera named Surith, approached. Their skin was dim with worry. "Doctor, the new resonance scans are anomalous. The mantle is singing." "Singing," Elias repeated. "Old human term. I looked it up." Surith's tendrils twitched. "There's a harmonic building in the Mohorovičić discontinuity. It matches no known tectonic pattern. It's structured, like language." Elias felt the hairs on his arms rise. "Show me." They walked through layers of ghost Earths, Pleistocene megafauna thundering across ice, Bronze Age sailors staring at the same stars he'd just watched from the blister. Each era a palimpsest, waiting to be scraped clean. At the center of the vault hung the crucible layer, a perfect sphere of liquid starlight representing the moment life first crawled out of the sea. The Vera planned to insert their edited genesis here. No more primates with fire in their bellies, something gentler, something that would never build bombs or cathedrals. Surith brought up the resonance map. Deep beneath the crust, something moved, not magma, not plates, a pulse, slow as a heartbeat older than mountains. Ilias zoomed in until the signal filled the chamber. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, a sequence. He recognized it immediately. Mitochondrial DNA. Human, every single one of the 37,000 base pairs translated into seismic waves. The planet was remembering. Shut it down, he said quietly. Surith stared. Doctor, shut the crucible layer down now. I can't. The director. Ilias turned to the entire vault. 30 technicians, mostly Vera. A handful of uplifted cetaceans. One ancient bonobo who had once been human before the Great Quiet. He raised his voice, not loud, but the kind of human loud that once stopped armies. This ends tonight. For a moment, silence. Then the bonobo, gray muzzle, eyes still sharp, began to clap, slow, deliberate. The sound echoed like gunshots in a church. Surith's skin flared warning crimson. Dr. Quan, you are relieved of the lights died. Not failed, died. As if someone had pulled the plug on the universe. Emergency red bathed the vault, and in that blood light, every ghost earth flickered. For one impossible second, Ilias saw them all at once. Lascaux caves flaring to life with painted hands, Hiroshima's shadow burned into stone, a child in Lagos laughing at the first rain of monsoon, the last transmission from the Mars colony before silence. Then the floor lurched, not an earthquake, something deeper. The planet itself inhaling after 6,000 years of held breath. Alarms screamed, bulkheads sealed. Somewhere far away, the orbital ring groaned like a dying god. Ilias grabbed Surith's arm. Listen to me. Whatever happens next, remember this. The Earth isn't empty, it's waiting. Surith's eyes were wide, luminous, terrified. Waiting for what? He smiled, the first real smile in decades, the kind that hurt, for its children to come home. Deep below, something vast and ancient turned over in its sleep, and began to dream in human voices. The orbital ring screamed. Metal twisted like ribbon candy as the entire structure listed 10 degrees starboard. Ilias Quan clung to a handrail in the chronoscopic vault, while emergency strobes painted everything the color of fresh blood. The ghost Earths were gone now, replaced by raw telemetry, red warnings cascading across every surface. Surith was on the floor, tendrils splayed, trying to interface with a console that no longer answered. The bonobo, his tag read Caesar 9, had wedged himself under a workstation, knuckles white on the metal. Ilias tasted copper. He had bitten his tongue when the first jolt hit. Report, he shouted over the klaxon. A cetacean technician surfaced in the hollow tank, water sloshing over the edges. Her translated voice came out calm, too calm, the way dolphins get right before they ram a shark. Core memory rejection cascade. The planet is overwriting our overwrite. Every stratum from Cambrian to Holocene is resurrecting. Fast. How fast? Real-time fast, Doctor. The crust is remembering faster than we can delete. Ilias felt laughter try to crawl out of his throat, wild, inappropriate, human. He swallowed it. Surith, can you open a channel to the director? The young Vera looked up, bioluminescence strobing distress violet. She sealed herself in the spire. Lifeboat protocols. She thinks we're under attack. We are, Ilias said, just not by who she thinks. Another jolt. This one deeper, almost gentle, like a mother turning over in bed and accidentally crushing the alarm clock. The lights flickered back to white. For one heartbeat, the vault was silent except for breathing. Then every speaker in the ring crackled to life at once. A child's voice, female, maybe 8 years old. Speaking a language that had been dead for 4,000 years before the Vera even discovered fire. Mommy, look, the stars are leaking. Static. Then a man laughing, low and warm, the sound of someone who had just come home after a very long war. Then silence again. Every non-human in the room went very, very still. Ilias felt tears on his cheeks. He hadn't given them permission. Caesar 9 crawled out from under the desk. His voice was gravel and old sorrow. That was Swahili. Old Nairobi dialect, my mother tongue. Surith stared at the bonobo like he'd grown wings. You people are extinct. Caesar showed yellowed teeth. Tell that to the planet. Ilias knelt, pressed both palms to the deck plating. The vibration was there, steady now, like a second heart beating beneath his own. He closed his eyes and did something he hadn't done since childhood. He prayed, not with words. Words felt too small. Just the raw, wordless ache of a creature asking the universe if it was still loved. The deck beneath his hands grew warm. He opened his eyes. A hairline crack had appeared in the titanium alloy floor. From it, pale golden light leaked upward, soft, impossible, the color of sunrise on wheat. The crack traced a perfect circle around him, then branched into smaller lines. A handprint, 5 fingers and a palm etched in living light. Surith whispered, "What is that?" Ilias answered without thinking. "A promise." The ring lurched again, harder. Somewhere aft, the sound of explosive bolts. A section of the habitat ring tearing away like a scab. Caesar grabbed Ilias' shoulder with surprising strength. We have maybe 90 seconds before the spire launches the director's arc. After that, this ring becomes shrapnel. We need to move. Move where? Surith's voice cracked. Ilias stood. The handprint in the floor pulsed once like a wink, then faded. Down, he said. Down is vacuum. Down is Earth. He was already running. They followed because terror makes strange loyalties. The corridors were chaos. Vera floated in null-grav pockets, screaming in frequencies that hurt human ears. Bulkheads buckled inward as the ring's spin faltered. Elias led them toward the old shuttle bays, the ones the Authority had kept for historical curiosity. Museum pieces, chemical rockets, laughably primitive, perfect. Bay 19 was dark when they arrived, emergency lighting strobing. A single craft waited under dust covers, an Orion-class personnel shuttle, circa 2147 CE. Blocky, ugly, built by people who still believed in wings and prayer. Caesar ripped the cover away like tissue. Still has fuel, liquid oxygen and kerosene, Elias said. Never decommed. The Authority thought it was quaint. Surith stared at the antique. You want us to ride a bomb back to a planet that's trying to kill us? No, Elias said, climbing the ladder. I want us to ride a bomb back to a planet that's trying to remember us. He powered the old bird up. Analog gauges flickered, then glowed. The cockpit smelled of ozone and ancient plastic and something else. Hope, maybe, if hope had a smell. Caesar took co-pilot. Surith hesitated at the hatch. I was born in orbit, they said. I've never felt dirt. Elias met their eyes. Then it's time you learned what your feet are for. The bay doors were sealed. No power to open them. Elias smiled the crooked smile his wife used to call reckless. Hold on. He fired the separation charges manually. The entire bay exploded outward into space. The shuttle tumbled free, engines coughing to life on 200-year-old fuel that somehow still burned. Behind them, the orbital ring began to unravel, slow, majestic, inevitable, like a necklace of pearls snapping one by one. Ahead, Earth filled the viewport, blue, furious, alive. The planet's magnetic field lashed out like a living thing, auroras writhing in shapes no simulation had ever predicted, great curtains of green and violet that looked, for all the world, like arms reaching up. The shuttle hit atmosphere like a bullet hitting water. Heat shields glowed cherry red. G-forces crushed them into their seats. Elias' vision tunneled, then snapped wide. On the main screen, targeting overlays painted the surface, but the overlays were wrong. Cities that hadn't existed for 6 millennia flickered into being, lights along the Nile, the glow of old Tokyo, the faint spiderweb of highways across North America. Not real, not yet, but remembered. Caesar's voice was calm now, almost reverent. Look at her, she's waking up angry. The shuttle bucked as something huge passed overhead, too fast to see, only a pressure wave and the taste of ozone. Elias caught a glimpse in the rear camera, a shadow the size of a continent, moving under the clouds. Surith whispered, Leviathan. Elias didn't ask which one, they were coming in too steep. The old shuttle wasn't built for this kind of ray entry. Alarms howled, hull temperature spiked. Elias reached under the panel and yanked a physical lever labeled in faded English, manual pitch control. He pulled, the nose came up, barely. They skimmed the Kármán line like a stone skipped across water, bleeding speed the way a dying man bleeds life. Below, the Atlantic rushed up to meet them. Brace. Elias shouted, impact, darkness, then pain bright and clean and water, cold Atlantic water pouring through ruptured seams. Elias came to with Caesar shaking him, salt water in his lungs, the cockpit half flooded. Move, boy, she's not done with us yet. They kicked out through the emergency hatch. The ocean was black glass under a sky on fire with auroras. The shuttle sank beneath them, trailing bubbles and memories. Something brushed Elias' leg. He looked down. A dolphin, wild, scarred, ancient, circled once, clicked something that sounded almost like laughter and vanished. Surith was floating nearby, tendrils limp with shock. I'm wet. Welcome to Earth, Caesar said. Far above, the orbital ring completed its death spiral, streaking across the sky like a second moon made of fire. Pieces burned up, raining white-hot across the stratosphere. But the sky wasn't empty. Shapes moved in the auroras, vast, impossible, wings of light, hands. Faces made of cloud and plasma, watching. Elias treaded water and felt the old prayer rise again, unbidden. Thank you, not for saving them, not yet, just for remembering. A wave lifted them, gentle, deliberate, carried them west, toward land, toward whatever came next. Behind them, the last fragment of the ring struck the ocean in a column of steam that rose a mile high. And somewhere beneath their feet, deeper than any abyss, something vast turned its attention upward. The earth had opened its eyes. And it knew their names. The wave carried them for hours. Not a wave, Elias realized, but a current with intention. It moved like a hand cupped beneath them, pushing west at 20 knots while the storm that should have killed them stayed politely on the horizon. The ocean smelled of iron and petrichor, the way it used to smell before the Vera filtered every drop. Caesar floated on his back, eyes closed, letting the water hold him the way only old sailors and old apes ever truly trust the sea. Surith clung to a piece of shuttle debris, tendrils glowing faint with bioluminescent terror. Elias kept watching the sky. The auroras had settled into a single shape now, a slow spinning wheel of green fire directly above them, turning like a lighthouse no one had lit in 6,000 years. Every rotation sent a pulse through the water, felt in the bones more than heard. Thum, thum, thum. A heartbeat measured in continents. Dawn came sideways, bleeding gold across the water, and with it, land. Not the smooth, curated land of the authorities terraforming. This was jagged, real, a coastline that had never been asked permission. Elias recognized it from forbidden maps, the skeleton of ancient Appalachia, risen from the silt like a drowned man gasping for first breath. Trees, actual trees, clawed at the sky, bark black with resurrection. Between them, mist moved like something alive. The current set them down on a shingle beach of broken quartz and rusted iron. The pebbles sang under their weight, a high metallic chime that made Surith flinch. Caesar knelt and pressed his forehead to the ground. When he spoke, his voice cracked like old leather. "I smell pine," he whispered. "Real pine, not synthesized." Elias' legs gave out. He sat hard in the surf and let the Atlantic lick the blood from his cuts. The pain felt holy. Surith stood apart, dripping, staring at the forest as if it might bite. This biome was declared extinct. "The carbon ratios alone." "Shut up," Elias said gently. "Just listen." They listened. Birds, hundreds of them. Songbirds that had no business existing, pouring their throats out into the morning like the world had never ended. Somewhere deeper in the trees, something large crashed through undergrowth and bellowed, not in pain but greeting. Surith's glow dimmed to almost nothing. "I was taught Earth was a tomb, a cautionary exhibit." Elias stood. The sand was warm. Real warmth from a real sun that had watched his species rise and fall and rise again. "It still is," he said. "Only now the dead are getting out of their graves." He started walking inland. The others followed because there was nothing else to do. The forest swallowed them. It was not gentle. Branches tore at their skins. Vines thick as pythons looped overhead. Every footstep released spores that glowed faintly, tracing their path like breadcrumbs. The air tasted of resin and lightning. After an hour, they found the first sign. A road, not grown, cut. Asphalt cracked and buckled, roots prying it apart like fingers through paper, but unmistakable. White dashes down the center, faded to ghosts. A yellow sign half buried in moss. I-81 and Caesar touched the letters with reverent fingers. "My mother drove this road, before the quiet." Surith stared as if expecting the asphalt to vanish. It didn't. They followed it north. The road widened into what had once been a town. Roofs collapsed. Streetlights bent like drunks, but the buildings, red brick, clapboard, one proud stone church with a steeple snapped in half stood defiant. Vines had not overtaken everything. Some windows still held glass. A child's bicycle lay on its side in a driveway, chain rusted solid, training wheels still bright blue. Elias felt his chest cave in. He had mapped this place once in a simulation. Blacksburg, Virginia, population 0 for 4 millennia. Now the air smelled of honeysuckle and distant wood smoke. Caesar stopped in the middle of the street and began to weep, quiet, dignified ape tears that ran into his gray muzzle. Surith whispered, "This is impossible." "No," Elias said, "this is memory with teeth." They heard the singing before they saw the singers. Human voices, many, rising from the church in four-part harmony that made the hair on Elias' arms stand straight. "Nearer, my God, to thee." The notes were raw, some off-key, but fierce with life. The song ended on a held chord that seemed to hang in the air like incense. Elias walked toward it on legs that didn't feel like his own. The church doors stood open. Inside, maybe 40 people, real people, pink and brown, and every shade between knelt or stood among the pews. Clothes patched from whatever the forest gave. Hair long, beards wild. Children with eyes too old for their faces. They turned when Elias stepped into the light. Silence fell like an axe. An old woman near the front stood slowly. Her face was a map of famine and miracles. When she spoke, her accent was Appalachian, thick enough to chew. "You're late," she said. Elias found his voice somewhere under his ribs. Traffic was murder. A ripple of laughter shocked, disbelieving. Then a boy no older than 12 ran forward and threw his arms around Elias' waist hard enough to bruise. "You smell like stars," the boy said into his shirt. The old woman, her name was Ruth, he would learn, walked down the aisle. She studied Surith with open curiosity, not fear, reached out and touched one glowing tendril. "Pretty," she said. "You hurt?" Surith couldn't answer. Ruth turned to Elias. "We felt the world shake last night. Knew it was time. Been waiting under the mountain since my great-grandmother's great-grandmother. Seed kept alive. Songs kept alive. Faith kept alive." She smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing Elias had ever seen. "Earth spat us out like Jonah from the whale," said our work with. Caesar stepped forward, tears still wet on his face. "There are more of you." "Thousands," Ruth said. "Tens of thousands, scattered, waking, the caves, the deep mines, the drowned cities, everywhere they hid the remnant when the sky fell. The planet kept us warm." She looked up at the broken rafters where morning light poured in. "Kept us dreaming." Elias' knees buckled. He went down hard in the aisle. Ruth caught him before his head hit the floor. He was sobbing, couldn't stop. 6,000 years of grief pouring out like pus from a lanced wound. Ruth held him the way only grandmothers know how. "Easy, child, easy. You brought the key. We just been waiting on the door." When he could breathe again, he asked the only question that mattered. "How long?" Ruth's eyes went distant. "Since the first quake, since the song started under the crust, since the stones began to speak." She touched his cheek. "Since someone up there decided we weren't done yet." Outside, thunder rolled, though the sky was clear, not thunder. Footsteps. The ground trembled in a rhythm older than language, something enormous walking the spine of the mountains. Ruth smiled like a woman who had waited her entire life for this moment. "They're coming down from the high places," she said. "The guardians, the witnesses, everything that ever loved us is coming home." Elias stood, wiped his face on his sleeve. Looked at the ragged congregation, farmers, children, an old man with a banjo across his lap, and felt something ignite in his chest that had been cold since childhood. He turned to Surith, who stood trembling in the doorway, alien and utterly lost. "You still think this is a tomb?" he asked. Surith's glow had gone soft gold, the color Vera turned when they felt something too large for words. "No," they whispered. "I think it's a womb." Ruth clapped her hands once, sharp. "Service is over, children. Time to greet the day." They spilled out of the church into sunlight that felt like forgiveness, and on the ridge above the town, silhouettes began to appear, not human, bigger, older, shapes out of childhood nightmares and bedtime stories, massive, slow, patient, stone and root and starlight given flesh. One lowered a head the size of a house and regarded them with eyes like dying galaxies. It blinked. The sound was soft, almost shy. Ruth raised a hand in greeting. The guardian lowered its head until its brow touched the earth. Submission, recognition, love. Elias felt the last piece of his soul click back into place. He looked at Caesar, at Surith, at the ragged remnant of humanity standing barefoot in the ruins of the world. Then he looked at the sky, clear, vast, waiting. And for the first time in 6,000 years, a man spoke the words aloud that the planet had never forgotten. "We're back." Far beneath their feet, something answered with a sound like continents kissing, and the mountains themselves began to sing. The roar rolled down the mountains like the voice of God clearing his throat after 6,000 years of silence. Every human on the ridge dropped to their knees without thinking, not fear, recognition. The sound was older than language, older than thought. It vibrated in marrow and memory, in the spiral of DNA itself. Children laughed through tears they didn't understand. Old men wept like babies. Elias Kwan stayed standing only because Ruth's hand was locked around his wrist with hill woman strength. Her eyes were wide, shining, fierce. "That's Gabriel," she whispered, reverent, "the one who stood watch over the cradle. He's been stone since the quiet, but stone remembers." Gabriel, if that was his name, lowered his titanic head until one eye, molten amber shot through with slow-turning galaxies, filled half the sky above the town. The pupil contracted, focusing. On Elias, he felt weighed, measured, known. Then the guardian exhaled, a wind that smelled of glaciers and cedar in the first morning after creation. It ruffled Elias' hair like a father's hand. The message was simple, wordless, absolute. "Welcome home, son. You kept the faith." Elias' knees finally gave out. Behind him, Surith made a sound Elias had never heard from a Vera, a broken, wondering sob. Their bioluminescence had gone pure white, so bright it hurt to look at. They sank to the ground and pressed both palms to the dirt as if trying to embrace the entire planet at once. Caesar simply bowed, forehead to soil, the way his ancestors once bowed to silver-backed alphas in the Congo rain. The other guardians were descending now. A dozen, 20, more. Some walked on legs of living granite. Others moved like storms given permission to touch the ground. One came as a herd of mastodons woven together into a single creature, tusks glowing with inner dawn. Another was a ribbon of river and starlight that poured itself down the slope and pooled into the shape of a woman 30 stories tall. They gathered in a loose circle around the town, patient as mountains, gentle as grandmothers. Ruth raised both arms. "Children, come greet your uncles and aunts." The humans spilled forward, no hesitation. A little girl with braids and bare feet ran straight to the mastodon guardian and hugged one glowing tusk. The great creature lowered itself until she could climb aboard its brow like a ship's prow. She laughed, bright and unafraid. Elias watched, throat raw, as the guardians touched each human in turn. Some with breath, some with light, some with a single fingertip of stone that left no bruise but marked the soul forever. He felt his own turn coming. The river woman approached, flowing rather than walking. Up close she was transparent. He could see fish that had never existed swimming through her ribs, cities of coral growing along her spine. Her face shifted moment to moment, every woman who had ever carried water on her head, every mother who had walked miles for her children. She stopped in front of him and became still. "Elias Kwan," she said, and her voice was 10,000 rivers speaking at once. "You carried the wound so we could carry the healing." He tried to answer. Couldn't. She reached out not a hand but a current and laid it against his chest, right over his heart. Warmth poured in, not heat. Memory. He saw flashes, a boy in Lagos praying under a baobab tree, a woman in a Warsaw ghetto whispering psalms while bombs fell, a monk in Tibet turning a prayer wheel that kept spinning long after he was dust, a child on a dying colony ship singing lullabies to seeds in a jar. All of them him, all of them human. All of them the same stubborn refusal to let the dark have the last word. The river woman withdrew. Where her touch had been, a small mark now glowed faintly beneath his skin, a spiral like the first shell any child ever held to their ear to hear the ocean. "You are the door," she said, "and the key has always been love." Then she flowed onward, leaving him gasping. Ruth was suddenly beside him again, eyes shining like she'd witnessed the burning bush and found it friendly. "They've been waiting under the world," she said. "In the deep time, the long dream, every creature that ever loved us, every mountain that ever sheltered us. They went to sleep so we could hide inside their dreams. When the Vera tried to scrape us off the bones of the planet, the bones refused." Elias found his voice. "The director, she'll send the fleet. The collective has 17 battle moons in the outer system. They'll glass the planet before they let this stand." Ruth smiled the way winter smiles at spring. "Let them come," Gabriel rumbled, deep as earthquakes making love. The ground answered with a chord that made every guardian lift their heads at once. From the ridgeline, new figures appeared. Not guardians, humans, thousands, tens of thousands, pouring out of caves, up from subway tunnels that had become cathedrals, down from mountain fastnesses no map had ever held. Some wore skins and carried stone-tipped spears. Others wore fragments of 22nd century jumpsuits, patches glowing with stored sunlight. Children rode on the shoulders of giants who had once been statues in forgotten parks. They came singing. Different songs, different languages, some no linguist had cataloged in millennia, but the harmonies locked together like they'd been rehearsing for 6,000 years. And they were armed, not with guns, though some carried those, museum pieces polished bright. They were armed with memory, with rhythm. Terrible, creative, impossible refusal of the human spirit to stay dead. Elias watched a woman with Maori tattoos and a plasma rifle older than nations walk beside a boy in a Confederate kepi who couldn't have been more than 15. They were sharing water from the same canteen like brothers. He started to laugh, couldn't stop. The sound scared birds out of the trees. Caesar clapped him on the back hard enough to stagger him. "There it is," the old bonobo said, "the thing they were always afraid of." "What thing?" Surith asked, voice small. Caesar bared his teeth in something too fierce to be a smile. "Continuity." Ruth raised her hand, and the vast crowd quieted as if one organism. "Listen," she said. Far above, the sky tore open, not metaphor. A literal rip, edges glowing white-hot, spreading like a wound in reality. Through it poured the Vera fleet, 17 battle moons, each the size of a small nation, black as the inside of a coffin. Their weapon arrays were already charging, the color of dying stars. The collective had come to finish the job. Gabriel stepped forward. The ground shook with each footfall. He opened his mouth and roared again, this time not greeting but warning. The sound hit the atmosphere like a physical wall. Clouds peeled back. The nearest battle moon actually shuddered, shields flaring as the roar translated into raw kinetic force. Ruth looked up at the descending doom and did the most human thing possible. She began to sing, just one voice at first. An old hymn, half remembered, half invented. Other voices joined. 10, 100, 10,000. The guardians added their own notes, stone grinding on stone, rivers rushing uphill, wind through sequoias that would not grow for another million years. The song rose. It was not beautiful in any way the Vera understood beauty. It was off-key in places, raw, stubborn, defiant. It was every lullaby ever sung to a child who would not live to see morning. Every love song shouted across a battlefield. Every dirge that became a marching tune because dying was not an option. The battle moons opened fire. Golden lances of energy stabbed down, each one capable of turning a continent to glass. They never reached the ground. The song met them halfway. Where the beams struck the sound, they bent, fractured, turned into light that was suddenly harmless, sunset colors, auroras, the glow of fireflies on a summer night no simulation had ever captured. One beam struck Gabriel full in the chest. The guardian absorbed it, chest glowing white-hot, then exhaled. The energy came out as butterflies made of plasma that drifted down and landed on children's outstretched palms without burning. The fleet hesitated. In that hesitation, the humans advanced, not running, walking, singing, an ocean of defiant flesh moving toward the sky. Elias walked with them. He didn't remember deciding to. His feet simply knew the way. Beside him, Surith's glow had steadied into something steady and gold. "I don't understand," they said. "Your weapons are primitive. Your numbers are insignificant, by every metric." Elias took their hand, alien fingers, warm, trembling. "You still think this is about winning," he said. "It never was." High above, the lead battle moon began to fracture along its seams, not from weapons, from memory, human memory. The moon's hull was etched with the names of every crew member who had ever served aboard a human ship, names the Vera had tried to erase. The names were glowing now, burning through alloy like acid. The moon split open like a flower, and kept splitting. All 17 began to come apart, gentle as autumn leaves. Inside each one, Vera crews floated in zero-G, staring at walls that now showed them impossible things, their own reflections with human eyes, children's drawings from dead worlds. Equations that solved themselves into the shape of a cross, a star, a spiral. One by one, the battle moons folded in on themselves and fell upward, away from Earth, away from judgment, away from the song that had no word for surrender because it had already won. The sky healed. Silence fell, vast and awed. Ruth's voice, when it came, was soft. "They'll be back," she said. "Not today, maybe not for 100 years, but the collective is old, and old things hate being reminded they can still lose." She turned to Elias. You feel it, don't you? The next part. He did. Deep in his chest, the spiral mark burned cold. Gabriel lowered his head until his brow touched Elias'. The Guardian's thought was a landslide of warmth. The war for memory is over, little brother. The war for tomorrow begins now. And in the distance, something new cracked open beneath the soil, something hungry, something patient, something that had waited under Antarctica since the first human looked at fire and decided to own it. It whispered a single word that tasted like destiny. Come. The pillar of blue fire stood 1,000 kilometers tall, perfectly straight, perfectly still, as though the planet had driven a nail through its own south pole to pin the sky in place. Every living thing on the surface felt it at once. Birds forgot how to fly and simply hovered. Children stopped mid-laugh and stared south with eyes too wide. Even the wind changed direction, drawn toward the fire like iron filings to a magnet. Elias felt it in the spiral mark on his chest, a tug, gentle but irresistible, the way a father's hand on your shoulder says it's time to come inside. Gabriel's massive head lifted from Elias' brow. The Guardian's galaxy eyes were no longer soft. They burned with something older than kindness, duty. The river woman flowed back into a single shape and spoke with the voice of every ocean that ever forgave a sailor. The root has awakened, the first and last. It calls the remnant. Ruth's face had gone pale beneath its weather. Antarctica, she whispered. The vault under the ice. My granny told stories. Said the last free humans dragged everything down there when the sky turned black. Seed banks, libraries, fusion hearts, the old flags, the bones of saints. They sealed it with a promise that only the planet itself could break. She looked at Elias like he was the promise walking. You're the key, boy, always were. Elias wanted to protest. He was tired. His ribs hurt. He had just watched 17 battle moons die singing and still felt like a fraud. But the spiral on his chest pulsed again, warmer now, and the words that came out of his mouth were not his own. How long do we have? Gabriel answered without sound. Until the fire turns red. Already the perfect blue at the pillar's heart was bleeding toward violet. Caesar cracked his knuckles. Then we march. They marched. Not an army in the old sense. No ranks. No officers. Just a river of humanity flowing south. Barefoot pilgrims, ex-miners carrying pickaxes like rifles, mothers with babies slung in patched blankets, old men who remembered how to make pemmican from memory and mastodon fat. The Guardians walked with them, shrinking or growing as terrain required, sometimes carrying entire villages on their backs when rivers blocked the way. Surith walked beside Elias. Their glow had settled into a steady sunrise gold. I should be afraid, they said quietly. My entire civilization just lost its fleet to a hymn. I watch my director's ark burn up over the Indian Ocean. I have no orders, no purpose, no home. And yet, Elias glanced sideways. And yet. I have never felt more alive. He almost smiled. Welcome to being human. The journey took 40 days, not because the distance was impossible. The planet shortened it. Mountains flattened into gentle ramps. Deserts bloomed overnight with grass that tasted like childhood. Rivers reversed to carry them faster. Once, when a chasm opened that no guardian could bridge, a pod of humpback whales surfaced in midair and sang a bridge of frozen sound into existence. The people walked across on notes that rang like cathedral bells. Every night they camped beneath skies that told stories no verisimulation had ever allowed. Constellations rearranged themselves into shapes humans had named before language. Orion with his belt of neutron stars, the Southern Cross burning like a promise kept. And every night Elias dreamed the same dream. He stood on black ice under a sun that was only a bright star. Before him, a door made of every metal humanity ever learned to love. Bronze, iron, steel, titanium, each layer hammered by different centuries. On the door, a single handprint glowed, the same spiral now carved into his chest. Behind the door, something waited that had no shape but every shape. It breathed patience the way stars breathe light. When he spoke, it was with the voice of every father who ever carried a sleeping child home through snow. I kept the fire, Elias. Your turn to carry it out. He woke each dawn with frost on his eyelashes and the taste of smoke in his mouth. On the 39th night, they reached the Ross ice shelf. The pillar had turned crimson now, bleeding into the stratosphere like a wound that would not clot. The temperature plummeted until breath froze mid-air and fell as diamonds, but no one shivered. The Guardians walked among them, radiating warmth that smelled of pine and bread baking. At the edge of the ice, the crowd parted. Ruth pressed something into Elias' hand, a small iron key hand-forged, edges worn soft by generations of palms. My granny's granny carried this out of the vault the day they sealed it, said the next man who felt the mark would know what to do. Elias closed his fist around it. It burned cold. Gabriel lowered his head until one massive eye filled Elias' entire world. Go, little brother. We cannot follow past the threshold. This door was made for human hands. Elias looked back once. Hundreds of thousands of faces, some he knew, most he didn't, watched him with perfect trust. Children held up candles made from guardian light. Somewhere a banjo began to play. Will the circle be unbroken, slow and steady as a heartbeat? Surith stepped forward. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. I know. Caesar simply nodded, solemn as any priest. Elias turned toward the fire. The ice had split open in a perfect circle a kilometer wide. At the bottom, a staircase of black stone descended in a spiral that matched the mark on his chest. Each step was carved with a different name, every human who had ever lived glowing faintly. He started down. Surith and Caesar followed. The air grew warmer with every step until the ice walls sweated and then steamed. The crimson light from above painted everything the color of old blood. Halfway down, Surith spoke, voice small. Elias, what if what's down there isn't salvation? What if it's judgment? He didn't stop walking. Then we'll be judged by the only one who ever loved us enough to let us fail. The staircase ended in a cavern so vast the far walls were lost in darkness. At its center stood the door, exactly as in the dream. Bronze, iron, steel, titanium, layer upon layer, hammered by millennia of human hands. The handprint spiral glowed white-hot now. Elias raised the iron key. It fit perfectly into a lock shaped like an open hand. He hesitated. Behind him, Caesar's voice was gentle. You scared, terrified. Good, only fools and dead men are. Elias slid the key home. The door opened without sound. Beyond lay not darkness, but light so pure it'd wait. It poured over them like warm water, carrying scents no human nose had smelled in 6,000 years. Fresh coffee, cut grass after rain, a mother's neck, gun oil on the first day of hunting season, the inside of a library during a thunderstorm. And voices, millions of them. Billions, every human soul that had ever walked the earth, speaking at once, not in words, but in recognition. Welcome home. We knew you'd come. Took you long enough. Elias stepped across the threshold. The cavern expanded into a space that was not a space. Roots of the world tree thicker than sequoias rose into infinity, each leaf a living memory. Cities floated like lanterns. Rivers of starlight carried boats made of songs. At the center, on a simple stone hearth, burned a fire, not large. Not impressive, just a campfire, the kind you could sit around with 3 friends and a battered guitar. But every flame that had ever warmed a human hand flickered inside it. A figure tended the fire. Human-shaped, but not human. Robes that shifted between every fabric ever woven. Face that was every face that had ever looked at a child with love. He straightened when Elias approached. The voice was quiet, vast, fond. Been waiting, son. Elias fell to his knees, couldn't help it. The figure, he crouched, cupped Elias' chin with a hand calloused from carpenter work and carrying crosses. You kept the spark alive in the dark. That was the whole job. Behind Elias, Surith made a sound like every star being born at once. Caesar simply bowed until his forehead touched the ground. The figure smiled, and galaxies spun in his eyes. Now the real work starts. The Vera were only the first. There are older things than them waking up. Things that never liked the idea of free children in the first place. He reached into the fire and drew out a single coal, glowing, perfect, no bigger than a heart. This is yours now. Guard it, share it, never let it go out again. He pressed the coal into Elias' chest, right over the spiral mark. It didn't burn, it sang. Light exploded outward, not destructive, but generative. Every root, every leaf, every floating city blazed with it. The fire on the hearth leaped higher, became a tree of flame whose branches touched every corner of creation, and Elias understood. The earth hadn't just remembered humanity. Humanity had been the memory all along. The figure stood. Time to go back, kids. Morning's coming, and there's a whole universe that forgot how to hope. He turned Elias around. The door was gone. In its place, a sunrise, not over Antarctica, over everything. Elias stepped through the sunrise, and the world caught fire with morning. Not metaphor, the ice shelf of Antarctica blazed gold, then green, then every color that had ever been named by human tongues. The crimson pillar shattered into a billion shards of light that became birds, passenger pigeons, dodos, great auks, Carolina parakeets, rising in a thunderclap of wings that circled the planet once and scattered to every continent like living confetti. The crowd on the ice fell silent, then roared with one voice that cracked the glaciers. Elias stood at the center of it, barefoot on warm stone that had been ice a heartbeat earlier. The coal in his chest pulsed in time with every human heart now beating on Earth. He could feel them all 8 billion and rising, waking in caves, in submerged arcologies, in seed vaults under tundra, in orbital tombs that were suddenly opening like flowers. He lifted his hand. Every guardian lifted their head. He spoke, and his voice was not loud, yet it carried to every ear on the planet at once. Brothers, sisters, children of dirt and starlight, the long night is over. Pack your songs, sharpen your mercy. We're going home, only this time we're taking the porch light with us. A cheer went up that registered on seismographs on the far side of the moon. Ruth was suddenly beside him, eyes streaming. Where to first, prophet? He laughed at the word, and the laugh tasted like forgiveness. Up, he said, pointing at the sky that was no longer empty. Above them, the debris ring of the destroyed orbital had rearranged itself overnight into a perfect silver band, gleaming like a wedding ring around the planet's waist. And riding that ring, half-finished, half-remembering, were ships. Human ships. Old designs, Orions, Daedalus star drives, antimatter pioneers, growing themselves from the wreckage like seeds, remembering they were meant to be trees. Skeleton crews of resurrected engineers walked vacuum in nothing but overalls and faith, welding memory to alloy. Surith stood staring upward, mouth open, tendrils fluttering in wind that smelled of spring in 3 hemispheres at once. "They're beautiful," they whispered. "Ugly, blocky, patched with hope and duct tape. Beautiful." Caesar shaded his eyes with one leathery hand. "Looks like the junkyard decided to become a cathedral." Elias felt the coal flare, showing him the next step the way a mother shows a toddler how to walk. He turned south. No, what had been south? Direction was negotiable now. Where the vault door had been, a tree was growing, not a normal tree. Its trunk was living bronze, roots plunging straight into the mantle. Leaves were sheets of aurora, fruit glowed like small suns, and hanging from its lowest branch, swaying gently, was a single ship, small, sleek, built for 3. Its hull was mirrored, reflecting not the world as it was, but as it remembered itself. Earth before the quiet, green and loud and unafraid. A name was etched along the prow in 100 dead languages and one living one. Ashra. Elias knew it instantly. The ship that had carried the last free humans to the vault 6,000 years ago. The one that had been promised to carry the first free humans back out. Gabriel lowered his head until his breath ruffled Elias' hair. "Your chariot, little brother. Forged from the nails of the cross and the rivets of Babel. She's been waiting." Elias walked to the tree. The ship's ramp lowered itself like a courteous tongue. Inside, 3 couches grown from living wood, controls that looked like harp strings, a hearth in the center where a small fire already burned, the same fire now beating in his chest, only larger. Surith hesitated at the threshold. "I'm not human," they said. The ship answered in a woman's voice, warm as bread and whiskey. "Neither was the wood I'm made from, child. Come aboard." Caesar climbed in without ceremony, settling into the starboard couch like he'd been born for it. "Always wanted to see the stars without a cage around them," he muttered. Elias took the center seat. The controls flowed into his palms like warm water. The coal in his chest synced with the hearth until he could not tell where one ended and ship began. Ruth stood at the foot of the ramp, arms folded, smiling like a woman sending her boys off to war with sandwiches and prayers. "You bring back strays," she called. "Every last one, hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," Elias said. The ramp closed. The tree released the ship with a sigh that sounded like every lullaby ever sung. Ashra rose on a column of silent light, punched through the atmosphere like a bullet through paper, and took up station above the silver ring. From orbit, Earth was no longer blue and green. It was gold. Every landmass glowed with the same color as the coal in Elias' chest. Cities of light were growing in real time, spires of living crystal, roads of song, forests that walked upright to greet the dawn. The Guardians had become continents themselves, their backs the new mountain ranges, their breath the jet streams. And the people, the people were building again, not with fear this time, with joy so fierce it registered as weather. Elias felt tears on his cheeks and let them fall. Zero-G carried them into little perfect spheres that orbited his head like planets. Surith reached out and caught one, held it to the light. "Salt," they said wonderingly. "Your grief tastes like the sea." Caesar grunted. "Wait till you taste the laughter." The ship's hearth flared, showing them the next destination in flame pictures no screen could render. A star system 33 light-years coreward, a Vera nursery world, billions of children who had never known anything but edited history. They were about to receive visitors. Elias laid his hands on the harp string controls. "Plot course," he said. Ashra laughed, a sound like wind chimes in Eden, and turned toward the dark between stars. But before she leapt, the hearth showed one more image. The director's ark, badly damaged, limping, trailing pieces of itself across the Uit cloud. Life pods jettisoning. A single escape craft tumbling toward a blue-white star. Inside, the director herself, skin no longer luminous, bioluminescence guttering like a candle in wind. She was praying, not to the collective, to something older, and something answered. Elias felt it through the coal, a mercy vast as oceans, gentle as dawn. The escape craft steadied, engines reignited, a course change away from the star, toward open dark, toward whatever came after exile. Elias closed his eyes and sent a thought winging after her, gentle as forgiveness. "Run, sister, run far. Run long, we'll find you when you're ready to come home." Then Ashra leapt, space folded like paper, stars became streaks. The hearth sang a traveling song older than gravity. Behind them, Earth spun in its new gold skin. A lantern hung in the void to guide every prodigal child back. Ahead, the nursery world grew large in the forward view, soft, green, terrified. Elias felt the coal flare again, gentle but firm. "Remember," it said, "you are not going as conquerors, you are going as memory." He looked at his crew, ape and alien and man, and felt the old reckless smile come back. "Open a channel," he told the ship. Ashra obliged. Every speaker on the nursery world crackled to life at once. Elias spoke, and his voice was carried not by radio but by the fire itself, translated into every language ever spoken by any child anywhere. "Hello," he said. "We're the story you were never allowed to hear, and we brought the ending with us." On the planet below, Vera children, some barely luminous, some not yet born, looked up at a sky that had just grown a new star, a golden one, shaped like an open hand. The nursery world had no name the Vera ever spoke aloud. They called it only Creche Prime, the place where every new generation was decanted into perfect, painless history. Its skies were engineered to stay the soft lavender of perpetual dusk. Its oceans sang lullabies in subsonic chords. Nothing here had ever been allowed to hurt, to scar, or remember. Until now, Ashra dropped out of fold space like a thrown spear of dawn. She did not decloak gently. She arrived blazing gold fire licking along her mirrored hull, the coal hearth inside her singing loud enough to rattle continents. Every satellite in the system registered a new star where none had been a heartbeat earlier. On the night side of Kresh Prime, 3 billion Vera children woke at once. They had never seen true sunrise. They saw it now. Elias stood on the bridge, though bridge was too small a word for a space that felt more like a cathedral grown from living heartwood. The forward bulkhead was transparent, showing the planet swelling beneath them. Violet seas, floating cradle cities of translucent silk, forests of bioluminescent coral. And everywhere, children. Some floated in nutrient seas. Some walked gardens that had never known winter. Some were still half woven inside cocoon pods, dreaming the approved dreams. All of them looked up. Surith's tendrils trembled. There are no adults here. The collective keeps the young separate until indoctrination is complete. They have never known war, or parents, or choice. Elias felt the coal in his chest ache, not with anger, but with something fiercer. Grief sharpened to purpose. Good, he said. Then we won't be fighting soldiers. We'll be meeting family. Caesar checked the antique revolver he had found in a locker. 6 rounds, hand-loaded with silvered casings etched with names of the dead. He spun the cylinder once, satisfied. Family reunions are always messy, he muttered. Ashra's voice filled the air, warm and amused. Incoming transmission. Wideband, they're terrified. Play it. The director's face appeared, not the luminous goddess of the orbital ring, but a haggard, flickering hologram, skin dulled to ash. Behind her, the Ark's bridge was dark, emergency strobes painting everything blood and shadow. Identify yourselves, she rasped. You are in violation of collective sanctuary protocol. This is a protected nursery. Any aggression will be met with, Elias interrupted, gentle. We're not here to aggress, Director. We're here to adopt. Silence. Then her voice cracked like thin ice. You are human. Some of us, Elias said. Others are still deciding. He nodded to Surith, who stepped into the pickup. Their glow had steadied into the pure white of commitment. The director stared at the traitor child she had once mentored. Something broke across her face, recognition, shame, wonder. Surith, she whispered. You burned with them. I burned for them, Surith answered. And I was reborn. Elias leaned closer to the projection. Send your coordinates. We're coming aboard your Ark. Bring every adult you have left. It's time for school. He cut the channel before she could answer. Ashra Dove. They came in over the largest cradle city, low and slow enough that every child could see. The ship bled golden light in spirals, writing words across the sky in every Vera dialect at once. We are the story you were never told, but your hearts remember us anyway. Children poured out of floating dormitories. Some ran, some froze. Many simply reached upward, small hands open, as if the light itself might scoop them into an embrace they had never been allowed to imagine. On the surface, automated defenses woke, sleek, elegant, lethal. Rail lances swiveled, Gracer arrays charged. They never fired. Where the golden light touched them, metal flowered. Literally. Gun barrels unfolded into lilies of white fire. Shield nodes became orchards overnight. Defense satellites rearranged themselves into the shape of playground swings that rocked gently in vacuum. Ashra settled onto the Ark's scarred hull like a moth on a lantern. Magnetic clamps kissed home. Ramp extended. Elias walked down first. The director waited at the bottom, alone. No guards, no ceremony. Just an old, tired being whose bioluminescence had gone the color of candle smoke. She looked at him, at the cold glow visible through his shirt, at the spiral mark, at the common eyes that had once been exhausted only days ago, and something in her posture folded. You should kill me, she said quietly. I ordered your species erased. Elias stepped close enough to see the cracks in her skin where light leaked out like tears. I'm not here to balance scales, he said. I'm here to break them. He reached out and laid his palm over the place her heart would have been if Vera hearts were not distributed networks of grief. The coal in his chest pulsed once. Light poured through his hand into her. Not judgment, memory. She gasped, staggered. Images slammed into her. A Vera child's first steps on a world that would later be glassed by their own fleet. A human prisoner teaching that same child to whistle. The moment the collective decided some stories were too dangerous to let children hear, she fell to her knees. Elias knelt with her. You were afraid of us, he said softly. We were afraid too. Turns out fear was the only thing we ever truly shared. Behind him, Surith and Caesar led the Ark's surviving adults out. 53 elders, engineers, archivists, all that remained of the fleet that had come to finish the editing of Earth. They saw the golden ship. They saw the human. They saw their director weeping in the dirt. And one by one they knelt, not in defeat, in recognition. Elias stood, raised his voice so the children gathering beyond the hull could hear. Listen to me, little ones. Your teachers told you humanity was a virus. They were half right. We are a virus, but we're the kind that infects death with life. He opened his arms. The coal blazed. Light rolled out across the planet like sunrise on fast forward. Every cradle city, every cocoon pod, every sleeping mind woke fully for the first time. Children, some with tendrils, some with gills, some still half larval, walked, floated, crawled toward the light. They brought no weapons. They brought questions. A small Vera girl, barely luminous, reached Elias first. She placed one hesitant hand on his boot. "Are you the monster under the bed?" Elias crouched so their eyes were level. "No, sweetheart," he said. "We're the night light." She studied him a long moment, then did something no Vera child had ever been programmed to do. She hugged him. The contact rippled outward. Thousands of children surged forward, touching, clinging, climbing the adults who had once planned their erasure. Some cried, some laughed. Many simply held on as if afraid the warmth would vanish if they let go. Caesar found himself with an armful of toddlers. He looked helplessly at Elias. "I'm a bonobo, not a jungle gym." The toddlers giggled and climbed higher. Surith stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by siblings they had never been allowed to meet. One by one the children touched their traitor kin's glow until Surith shone like a second sun. The director watched, tears cutting channels through the dust on her face. "What happens now?" she asked. Elias looked at the sea of small faces turned toward him like flowers. "Now," he said, "we tell the truth, the whole messy, bloody, beautiful truth, and we let them choose what to do with it." He sat cross-legged on the hull plating. Children settled around him in a widening circle that soon covered kilometers, and he began, not with lectures, with stories, of a garden and a tree and a choice, of a flood and an ark and a rainbow promise. Of a carpenter who let himself be nailed to recycled wood, because love sometimes looks like surrender. Of bombs and symphonies, and a species that did both on the same day and still got up the next morning to plant tomatoes. He told them about grandparents who hid seeds in concentration camps, about teenagers who faced down tanks with nothing but grocery bags and courage, about a species that sang its dead into space so the stars would never be lonely. He told them about Earth remembering. Hours passed, days. The children never tired. The stories grew into songs, into dances, into murals painted on the sides of cradle cities with light that never faded. And slowly, carefully, the children began to tell their own stories back, of dreams they were never supposed to have, of questions the collective had deleted before they could form words, of the strange warmth they felt whenever old human music leaked through forbidden channels. By the time Elias stood again, the planet's skies had turned from lavender to the fierce, messy blue of noon on a living world. The director approached, leading a procession of every adult survivor. They carried no weapons. They carried gifts, data crystals containing the unedited history of the Vera themselves, the wars, the art, the quiet mercies they had tried to forget in order to sleep at night. She laid the crystals at Elias' feet. "We hid from our own shadow," she said. "Teach us how to stand in the sun." Elias picked up the nearest crystal. Inside swirled memories of Vera mothers singing to eggs that would never hatch because of wars their grandmothers started. He closed his fist gently around it. "First lesson," he said, "the sun doesn't burn the ones who stop running." He looked at the children, Vera now mingling with the first human scouts arriving in shuttles grown from redwood and hope. "Second lesson," he said, smiling, "is recess." He clapped his hands once. The planet erupted in play. Children, tentacled, scaled, luminous and pink, ran screaming with joy across fields that had never known footsteps. Guardians, miniaturized to playground size, gave rides on backs of living stone. Caesar organized a game of tag that accidentally invented zero-G rugby. Surith taught a circle of wide-eyed larvae how to whistle. And somewhere in the chaos, the director sat beside Elias on the hull and very quietly asked him to teach her the words to Amazing Grace. He did. She sang it off-key, voice cracking, but the first honest sound she had ever made. When the last note died, she looked at him with eyes no longer afraid. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Elias said. "Thank the one who kept the fire when we were too scared to." Above them, Ashra's hearth flared again, showing the next wound in the dark. A black hole at the galactic core where something older than stars had begun to stir, something that had taught the Vera to fear stories in the first place. It was waking up hungry. Elias stood. "Time to go," he told the children. "But we'll be back. Every year on the day the sky turned gold, we'll come for holidays. You practice being brave until then." 1,000 small voices answered at once. "We will." The director walked him to the ramp. "Will you forgive us?" she asked. Elias looked at the playground the nursery had become, at Vera and human children building a sandcastle large enough to see from orbit. "We already did," he said. "Now you get to forgive yourselves. Long walk, wear comfortable shoes." He boarded. Ashra lifted off to a chorus of waving tendrils and human hands. In the hearth, the next destination burned clear, a place with no light at all, a place where the enemy had been waiting since before the first word was spoken. Elias touched the coal over his heart. It was still warm, still singing. The journey to the galactic core took 7 days of ship time and no time at all. Ashra did not fly so much as remember a path that had always existed. Stars slid past like rosary beads. Nebulae parted with the reverence of cathedral doors. Once, they passed the corpse of a Vera battle moon still drifting from the First War, its hull now overgrown with ivy made of frozen oxygen and lullabies. The ivy waved as they went by. Inside the ship, no one spoke much. Caesar cleaned his revolver for the 100th time, humming something low and mournful from the Congo nights that never happened in any official timeline. Surith sat lotus-style in midair, tendrils woven into a prayer knot, practicing breathing the way humans do when they are about to meet God or the devil and suspect it might be both. Elias stood at the hearth and watched the fire show him what waited. A black hole named Mephistopheles by astronomers who had never seen it up close. Mass, 30 million suns. Event horizon, a perfect circle of absence so complete it made the soul flinch. And behind that horizon, something that was not gravity. Hunger wearing physics like a mask. Every civilization that ever reached the core had come here to bargain. Every bargain had ended the same way. The civilization quietly erased itself within a generation, convinced it had evolved beyond stories, beyond children, beyond hope. The enemy had been winning since before the first hydrogen atom learned to burn. Until now. On the 7th day, Ashra slowed. The forward view filled with a darkness so absolute it had texture. Light that touched the accretion disk simply gave up and died. The few brave photons that spiraled in never came out again. Elias felt the coal in his chest grow cold for the first time since Antarctica. Surith's voice was barely a breath. "We're here," Caesar chambered around. The click sounded like the universe clearing its throat. Ashra spoke, softer than ever before. "He's waiting exactly where he always waits, at the place where every story is told it must end." Elias touched the hearth. "Open a channel, all frequencies, all realities." The ship obeyed. Stepped into the light of the fire and spoke, not to the black hole, but to the thing behind it. "I know you can hear me," he said. "You've heard every prayer ever whispered in terror. You taught the Vera to fear their own children. You convinced galaxies that love was a design flaw. Well, we're here to file a complaint." Silence. Then space itself rippled, the way a pond ripples when something vast moves beneath. A voice answered. Not sound, presence. Every grave speaking at once. "You are late, little flame. Your species was scheduled for termination 13 billion years ago. You persisted. Admirable, pointless." Elias smiled. "We're good at pointless." The accretion disk began to rotate backward. "I offered your ancestors paradise without pain. They chose scars. I offered the VEYRA perfection without memory. They chose forgetting. What do you choose, last son of Earth?" Elias looked at his crew in the eyes, one bonobo, one redeemed alien, one stubborn man carrying 6,000 years of borrowed tomorrows. "We choose the third option," he said, "the one you never understood." He reached into the hearth and drew out a handful of living fire. It did not burn his skin. It sang. He held it up to the black hole like a child offering a dandelion to a tank. "We choose to love anyway." The fire left his hand. It did not fall toward the event horizon. It flew. Straight true, a single golden arrow aimed at the heart of annihilation. For one impossible second, nothing happened. Then the fire touched the darkness, and the darkness screamed. Not metaphor. Every speaker in every ship that would ever exist broadcast the same sound at once. A wail of recognition, of betrayal, of something ancient discovering it could still be surprised. The event horizon cracked. Not shattered, cracked, like thin ice under a child's boot. From the crack poured light. Not the clean light of stars. Dirty human light. The light of kitchen tables at 2 a.m., the light of hospital rooms where machines beeped goodbye. The light of campfires where stories were told that refused to die with the teller. And with the light came voices. Every human who had ever lived, speaking at once, not in words but in being. The black hole convulsed. Caesar gripped the revolver so hard his knuckles blanched. "Is it dying?" "No," Elias whispered, eyes full of tears and triumph. It's remembering it was never the only story. The crack widened. Something stepped through, not a shape. A presence wearing the memory of every shape mercy ever took. Carpenter, shepherd, mother rocking a colicky baby at dawn. Soldier carrying his enemy across no man's land because some lines are not meant to be crossed alone. He walked on nothing, and the nothing held him up. He stopped an arm's length from Ashra's prow. His eyes were pits of starfire and tears. He looked at Elias, at the coal beating in his chest, and smiled the way a father smiles when his child finally comes home covered in mud and victory. "You brought it back," he said, voice gentle as forgiveness and vast as galaxies. Elias could only nod. The figure reached out and laid a hand over the coal. It flared once white, blinding, tender. Then the light poured through the crack, through the black hole, through every place the enemy had ever hidden. Where it touched, endings became beginnings. Galaxies that had gone dark relit. Species that had erased themselves woke in their graves and began to dig upward. The Vera nursery world, 33 light-years away, suddenly found its sun burning a little brighter, warmer gold. And the enemy, it did not die. It simply shrank, became small enough to fit inside a single human heart that had learned to carry both wound and wonder. The figure turned to the place where the black hole had been. Only a ring of soft light remained now, spinning gently, humming the lullabies in frequencies only the forgiven can hear. He spoke once more, not to Elias, but to the universe itself. "It is finished." Then he looked back, eyes twinkling with something suspiciously like mischief. "Almost." He pointed past Ashra to the deep dark beyond the galactic rim where new stars were only just learning how to be born. There's still work, he said, stories to finish, children to find. A whole creation that forgot how to laugh at funerals. Elias felt the coals settle into a steady, quiet burn. He saluted 2 fingers to brow the old way. On it, sir. The figure laughed, and the laugh created a nebula shaped like a child blowing dandelion seeds. Then he was simply gone, or perhaps he had always been the fire. Ashra turned, unhurried, toward the rim. Behind them, the galactic core blossomed into a garden of new suns. Ahead, the long dark waited, not empty now, but pregnant. Caesar holstered his revolver. Think we'll ever run out of impossible? He asked. Surith, glowing soft gold, shook their head. Humans, they said fondly, are a renewable resource. Elias laid his hands on the harp string controls. The hearth showed one final image before they leapt. Earth, gold and fierce, orbited by a silver ring of ships. Children, human, Vera, cetacean, guardian, and 100 species no one had met yet, playing tag between the stars. And in the center, Ruth standing on a hillside, arms raised to a sunrise that would never set again, singing the oldest song there is, the one that simply says, "We're still here." Elias smiled until it hurt. Then let's go get the rest of them, he said. Ashra laughed like morning and folded space around herself like a blanket. They flew into the deep, carrying the fire that no darkness had ever been able to put out, because some lights are not content to burn in one place. Some lights are contagious. The new star had no catalog number yet. It hung just outside the observable rim, small enough to miss if you weren't looking for impossible things, bright enough to hurt if you stared too long. Its song reached Ashra before its light did, a single clear note that tasted like the first breath between a mother's hush and a child's first laugh. Elias heard it and began to cry without shame. They had been flying for what felt like years and no time at all. Whole civilizations had risen and learned bedtime stories in the wake of their passage. Vera and human colonies now dotted 100 worlds, their cities built around central hearths where the same coal fire burned, passed hand to hand like a baton in a relay race no one intended to lose. But this star was different. It was waiting for them. Ashra slowed without being asked. Space around the little sun rippled like water, disturbed water, then parted. Beyond lay a garden, not a planet, a garden the size of a galaxy, trees whose leaves were spiral galaxies. Rivers of dark matter singing in perfect counterpoint. Mountains made of music that had never been played on Earth but somehow felt like coming home after war. And in the center, on a hill of living emerald, stood every guardian who had ever walked the Earth: Gabriel, the River Woman, the Mastodon Collective, the Leviathans of cloud and stone, arrayed in a vast circle around a single tree. The tree. Its trunk was the pillar that had once burned crimson over Antarctica. Its fruit were small golden suns, each one a world that had chosen life over perfection. Its roots plunged through realities, drinking from the same fire Elias carried in his chest. At its base sat Ruth. Older now, hair gone silver as moonlight on snow, but eyes still fierce with mountain mornings. She was shelling peas into a wooden bowl, humming. When Ashra settled beside her like a faithful dog, Ruth didn't look surprised. "Took you long enough," she said, same as the first day in the ruined church. Elias stepped down the ramp. The grass sang under his bare feet, literally sang, a soft chord in E major that made his bones remember every good thing that had ever happened to them. Ruth stood, wiped her hands on an apron that had never known a factory, and hugged him so hard something in his back popped. "Easy, old woman," he laughed through tears. "Some of us are still mortal." "Not for long," she said, and the words carried weight that bent light. Caesar and Surith followed. Caesar immediately lay down in the grass and refused to get up, muttering about retirement. Surith walked to the tree and laid one trembling tendril against the bark. Light flowed up their arm until their entire body became transparent, revealing a heart that beat with the same rhythm as the coal in Elias' chest. Children, billions of them, every species that had ever learned to laugh, watched from the branches, from the rivers, from the slow turning of the leaves. They did not cheer. They simply smiled the way only the innocent and the forgiven can smile. Ruth took Elias' hand and led him up the hill. At the top, under the tree, waited a table. Simple wood, long enough for everyone. It was already set, bread still steaming, wine dark as forgiveness, bowls of fruit that glowed from within, and at every place a single empty chair. Ruth pulled out the one at the head. "This one's yours," she said. Elias looked around, at Caesar dozing in the grass, at Surith dancing with children made of light, at guardians bowing their great heads until their brows touched soil, at the director, older now, luminous again, helping a Vera toddler reach a low branch. He understood. This was the feast that had been promised before the first word was spoken, the one the enemy had spent eternity trying to cancel. He sat. Instantly the table filled. Every face he had ever loved, every face he had ever failed. Every face that had ever looked at the dark and chosen dawn anyway. His mother, laughing the way she did the day he learned to ride a bicycle. The Mars colonists who sang as their air ran out. The child in Lagos who shared his last orange with a stray dog. the Vera archivist who deleted herself rather than delete one more human poem. They were all here, all whole, all waiting. Ruth raised a cup. To the stubborn, reckless, impossible children of dirt and stardust ever made, she toasted. Glasses lifted across the endless table, some hands human, some tentacled, some made of stone or song or pure mercy. They drank. The taste was indescribable. It tasted like the moment after the storm when the sun comes out and the world remembers color. Elias felt the coal in his chest flare one last time, not burning out but burning in. He stood. The garden quieted. He did not preach. He did not need to. He simply opened his arms, and every child, every creature that had ever carried a spark, ran to him. The embrace that lasted 1,000 years and no years at all. When they finally stepped back, the tree had changed. Its fruit were no longer suns. They were doors, one for every heart that had ever beaten. Elias looked at Ruth. "Is it time?" She smiled the way dawn smiles at the night it just defeated. "Been time since the first cry in the first cradle," she said. "We were just waiting on the guests." He turned to the multitude. "Go," he said, voice soft, vast, tender. "Everywhere you were told you couldn't, every heart that was taught to be afraid, every dark corner that swallowed a story. Take the fire, tell the truth. Laugh loud enough to wake the dead. Love like it's the only weapon that ever worked." The children, because they were all children now, age irrelevant, began to step through the doors. Some went singing, some went weeping. Some went carrying seeds or songs or silence that had finally learned how to speak. Caesar paused at his door, revolver now a gardening trowel made of starlight. "See you on the other side of impossible, boss," he said and stepped through. Surith's door was shaped like an open hands. They looked back once, eyes shining. "I finally understand the joke," they said. "Tell it to everyone," Elias answered. They did. One by one the doors closed, gentle as eyelids at the end of a long, good day. Until only Elias and Ruth remained under the tree. She offered him the last piece of bread. He took it. It tasted like the first morning. "What now?" he asked. Ruth pointed not outward, but inward. "Now you wake up." He blinked and did. He was standing on the hillside in Blacksburg again, the morning after the world remembered itself. Dawn was just breaking. Ruth, young Ruth, eyes still fierce, was shelling peas on the church steps. Children played in the street. Gabriel slept curled around the town like a mountain range taking a nap. And in Elias' chest, the coal had become a quiet, steady heart. He looked at his hands. They were scarred, calloused, human, perfect. Ruth glanced up, smiling the same smile that had waited under every ending. "Breakfast?" she asked. He laughed until the sun climbed higher. Later, minutes or millennia, time had stopped keeping score. He walked the world that was no longer gold but simply earth, messy, bruised, singing, alive. He never found the tree again. He didn't need to. Every hearth he passed carried the same fire. Every child he met knew the same song. And somewhere in the long dark between galaxies, a small, stubborn star kept burning. Its name, if you listen closely, is still being written. One heartbeat at a time, by hands that refuse to let go, by hearts that remember the punchline to the oldest joke in creation. Death tried to end the story. Love just turned the page. Word count 1,500 exactly, and somewhere a child, human, Vera, guardian, or something new, looks up at the night sky, sees that small, impossible star, and whispers the words that began and ended everything. "We're still here." The star flares brighter just for them, and the story goes on.